Imagine sitting at Thanksgiving, thinking you're surrounded by family, only to find out they had a different plan. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. Back when we were kids, before things got complicated, before everything started to feel so performative. It was about warmth, laughter, burnt pies, and board games that somehow turned into shouting matches. Somewhere along the way, the warmth faded, but I kept clinging to the tradition like it was a life raft. I should have seen it coming. The slow shift in my family wasn't sudden. It was like a slow leak in a tire. One by one, the smiles got tighter, the conversations more polite, the hugs more obligatory. My sister Melissa had always been the golden child, prom queen, straight-A student, now a lawyer with a house bigger than our childhood one. My brother Ryan was the rebel who still somehow managed to stay everyone's favorite, the charming screw-up you couldn't stay mad at. And then there was me, the dependable one. The one who called on birthdays, who showed up to help move furniture, who loaned money without being asked. The one no one really talked about, unless they needed something. I used to think that meant I was valued. I know better now. As Thanksgiving approached, I debated whether to go. It would have been easy to stay home, blame work, fake an illness. But something in me still held out hope that this year would be different. That maybe, just maybe, they'd see me not as the black sheep, not as the afterthought, but as part of the family. The day before, my mom called. "Hope you're still coming tomorrow," she said, her voice a little too bright. She said, forcing cheerfulness. "I'll be there," I answered, smiling despite myself. I confirmed, feeling a familiar pang. Good, she said quickly. "Everyone's excited to see you." She rushed through the words. I knew that wasn't true, but I wanted it to be. I spent Thanksgiving morning trying to calm my nerves, ironed my best shirt, picked out a decent bottle of wine, even practiced a few casual greetings in the mirror. It was stupid, but I couldn't help it. Walking into that house was always like stepping onto a stage where the script had been written without me. When I arrived, the house looked exactly the same as always. Same sagging porch, same faded autumn wreath on the door. I knocked, even though I knew I didn't have to. Old habits. Ryan opened the door, grinning. "Look who decided to show up," he said, clapping me on the back. He said with a smirk. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, smiling tightly. Masking my discomfort. Inside, the house was bustling, kids running underfoot, the smell of turkey and pumpkin pie thick in the air. It should have felt comforting. It didn't. Mom rushed over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You made it," she exclaimed. She said, pulling me into a quick, stiff hug. "Yeah," I said. "Traffic wasn't too bad," I said casually. I handed her the wine. She took it with a distracted nod and set it on the counter without looking. Melissa was in the living room, laughing loudly with a couple of cousins. She spotted me and gave a quick wave, then turned back to her conversation without missing a beat. I stood there for a moment, feeling like a guest at someone else's party. Dinner was the usual chaos, everyone talking over each other, passing plates back and forth, someone spilling cranberry sauce onto the tablecloth. I laughed at the appropriate moments, offered to help clear plates, tried to make myself useful. At one point, Ryan nudged me. "Still working that dead-end job?" he asked, grinning around a mouthful of mashed potatoes. He asked mockingly, "Still pretending you'll win the lottery?" I shot back with a small smile. I replied sharply. He laughed, slapped me on the back again, and turned back to his plate. Apparently, that was considered bonding. As dessert was served, I felt a strange tension in the air, a kind of collective holding of breath. I told myself I was imagining it. Paranoia. Old wounds. Mom set a pie in front of me. "Your favorite," she said quickly. She said, avoiding my eyes. "Thanks, Mom," I said, genuinely touched. I thanked her sincerely. Maybe things were finally turning around. Maybe I had been wrong. I tried to relax, to savor the moment. I looked around the table, at the people who had shaped my childhood, for better or worse. For a moment, it felt almost real. And then Melissa cleared her throat and stood up, tapping her glass with her fork. The room fell silent. I felt my stomach knot instinctively. "I just wanted to say something," she said, her voice ringing out clearly. She said, looking around the room. I smiled encouragingly, thinking she was about to make some heartfelt speech, maybe an apology, maybe an acknowledgement. Maybe this was the moment. It was, just not the one I hoped for. "We talked," she said, glancing at Ryan, then at my parents. "We voted," she continued firmly. "And you're not family anymore." She finished with a small, satisfied smile. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I stared at her, then at the others. No one spoke. No one looked at me. Not even my mother. The silence was deafening. For a few seconds, no one said anything. The clinking of forks and the buzz of conversation from a minute ago were gone, like someone had cut the sound from the room. I looked at Melissa, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was all just a bad joke. But no one did. "Wait. What?" I asked slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. I asked, stunned. Melissa smiled a little wider, like a performer proud of her grand finale. "You heard me," she said calmly. "We decided you're not part of this family anymore." She repeated, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned to Mom, hoping, praying she'd speak up, say it was ridiculous, say it wasn't true. But she just stared down at her plate, picking at the edge of her napkin. "Mom?" I said, disbelief dripping from my voice. I called out to her. She shifted in her seat but didn't look at me. "Maybe it's for the best," she mumbled. She muttered weakly. It hit me harder than I expected, harder than anything Melissa could have said. Mom wasn't just allowing it. She agreed. I turned to Ryan, who shrugged like it wasn't even worth discussing. "Don't make a scene, man," he said with an eye roll. He said dismissively. "A scene?" I repeated, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. I echoed in shock. "You always were too sensitive," Melissa added, picking up her wine glass. She added with a smirk. "Sensitive. That word. That curse they loved to throw at me whenever I dared to feel anything." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a screech that made a few of the kids wince. "So that's it?" I asked, scanning the table. I asked, feeling my voice tremble. No one answered. No one even looked up. "You're just voting me out?" I said, my voice breaking into an incredulous laugh. I asked bitterly. "You're not exactly a team player," Ryan said, stuffing another bite of pie into his mouth. He said, chewing noisily. "You're always off doing your own thing," Melissa chimed in. "You never really fit in anyway," she said, almost gleefully. I shook my head, trying to find some anchor in the surreal nightmare unfolding around me. "Because I didn't want to be like you?" I asked, unable to keep the anger from my voice. I asked sharply. Melissa raised her eyebrows, unbothered. "You never belonged," she said simply. She stated coldly. I looked at my father, sitting at the end of the table. He hadn't said a word the whole time. He wasn't even pretending to listen. "Dad?" I called out, desperate. I called to him. He didn't even glance up, just reached for the gravy boat like nothing was happening. That was it then. I looked around one last time. Cousins avoided my gaze. Aunts and uncles exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one moved to stop it. No one said a word in my defense. The final vote had already been cast. I felt a strange calm wash over me. Like the worst had already happened, and there was nothing left to fear. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said quietly. I said, almost to myself. No one answered. I walked to the front door, each step heavier than the last. As I reached for the handle, I heard Melissa's voice behind me. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out," she said sweetly. She called out mockingly. I paused for half a second, my hand frozen on the knob. Part of me wanted to turn around, to scream, to throw the bottle of wine I had brought. But what was the point? They had made their choice. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold night. Outside, the air was sharp and unforgiving. It bit at my cheeks, made my eyes water. Or maybe that wasn't the cold at all. I stood there on the porch for a moment, staring up at the stars, wondering how something so beautiful could exist in a world that had just slammed a door in my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Happy Thanksgiving, man. Hope you're doing good," the message read. He messaged warmly. I stared at it for a long moment, the irony almost laughable. I put my phone away and started walking. No destination, no plan, just away. Away from a house that no longer felt like home. Away from people who had decided that blood didn't mean loyalty. And for the first time, maybe ever, I realized that being alone was better than being where you were never truly wanted. I didn't go home right away. I walked the empty streets for what felt like hours, my hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, my breath coming out in small white clouds. Thanksgiving had always been about coming home, about belonging. Tonight, there was no home, no belonging. Just the cold and the endless dark stretch of road ahead of me. I eventually ended up at a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind that was always half empty and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. I slid into a booth by the window and ordered the driest slice of pumpkin pie I'd ever eaten. It didn't matter. I wasn't hungry anyway. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same old friend. "Seriously, hope you're okay. Haven't heard from you in a while," he wrote. He texted again, concerned. I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally typing back. "Got kicked out of Thanksgiving. Whole family voted me out," I replied. I responded, feeling numb. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" he finally sent. He replied, shocked. "Yeah," I wrote back. "Dead serious." I confirmed bluntly. "Man, that's messed up. You want to come over? We're just hanging out, watching stupid movies," he offered. He invited warmly. I smiled for the first time that night. "I'll be there," I wrote. I accepted gratefully. When I got to his place, it was casual chaos. Pizza boxes, bad horror movies playing, people I hadn't seen in years laughing and yelling at the screen. No judgment, no politics, no silent condemnation. "Hey, it's the prodigal son," my friend joked, clapping me on the back. He joked warmly. "Prodigal implies I get to go home someday," I said dryly. I replied with a grim smile. He frowned slightly, but let it go, handing me a beer and pulling me into the room. That night was the beginning of something I didn't realize I needed. A different kind of family. One chosen, not assigned. Over the next few weeks, I barely heard from my biological family. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. At first it hurt. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, wanting to send a holiday greeting, an update, anything. Wanting some proof that the people who raised me hadn't really meant it. But there was nothing. Instead, I threw myself into work, picked up extra projects, stayed late at the office, anything to keep my mind occupied. I met new people, friends who didn't measure my worth by old grudges or childhood mistakes. Friends who just liked me. For me. One night, after a long shift, I grabbed dinner with a coworker named Lena. We sat in a cheap taco place, swapping stories about dysfunctional families. "My mom once pretended to forget my birthday because she was mad I didn't visit her," Lena said, laughing bitterly. She said, rolling her eyes. Wow, I said, raising my eyebrows. I said, wincing. Family's just a lottery, she shrugged. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you spend your life wishing you could cash out, she said, shrugging. I nodded slowly, feeling something click into place. I think I just got evicted from mine, I said. I admitted quietly. You're better off, she said firmly. Blood doesn't mean loyalty, she said, her voice steady. It was a truth I hadn't been ready to hear before, but now, it fit like a missing puzzle piece. As December rolled around, the world lit up with Christmas decorations, cheerful music blaring from every corner. Everywhere I went, there were reminders of families gathering, laughing, being together. I would be lying if I said it didn't sting. There were nights when the loneliness felt like a physical weight on my chest, nights when I wondered if I should have fought harder, yelled louder, demanded they see me. Nights when I questioned if maybe, somehow, I had deserved it. But those nights got fewer and shorter. Because every time I started to slip back into that pit, someone reached out, a text, an invite, a simple, "Hey, you good?" That reminded me I wasn't as alone as I thought. And then January came. Ryan called me out of the blue. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said cautiously. I answered, unsure. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Listen, Dad's sick," he said, sounding uncomfortable. I waited, silent. "Like really sick," he added quickly. He added, rushing his words. I still said nothing. Waiting. "We're trying to figure out hospital stuff and, well, Mom thought maybe you could help," he said finally. He said, his voice faltering. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, bitter sound. "You mean the family that voted me out?" I asked sharply. I asked, my voice hard. "Come on, man, don't be like that," Ryan said. He said, sounding irritated. "How should I be, Ryan?" I asked, my voice rising. I demanded. He sighed heavily. "Look, we were upset, okay? Melissa got everyone worked up. You know how she is," he said weakly. He tried to excuse it. "Mom agreed," I said, cutting him off. "Don't pretend it was just Melissa," I said bitterly. There was a long pause. "Whatever, man," Ryan muttered. "Forget I called." He muttered angrily. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. There was a time when I would have rushed over, dropped everything to be there. There was a time when a call like that would have shattered me. Not anymore. They made their choice. And so would I. I didn't call back. I didn't drive to the hospital. I didn't send flowers. I moved forward. Winter gave way to spring, and with it, a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. I started a side business, something I'd always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. I built something with my own hands, my own sweat, my own spirit. Something no one could vote me out of. I spent weekends with friends who had become more like siblings than my actual siblings ever were. We had barbecue nights, movie marathons, game tournaments, laughter that didn't have sharp edges hidden underneath. One night, sitting around a fire pit, someone asked me if I missed my family. I thought about it for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I miss what I thought they were," I said finally. I answered honestly. Nobody pressed me further. Nobody needed to. They just passed me another drink and shifted the conversation to something lighter. That was real family. Not the people who shared your blood. The people who shared your battles. Thanksgiving came around again before I even realized a year had passed. The invitations from old friends started rolling in early November. "Come spend Thanksgiving with us," they said. "Bring whatever you want. Or nothing at all. No expectations, no invisible scorecards, just open doors." I had already accepted an invite when the text came. It was from Mom. "We'd like you to come to Thanksgiving," the message read simply. She wrote, reaching out at last. No apology, no acknowledgement, just an invitation like nothing had ever happened. I stared at the screen for a long time, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted to rage, to send a reply so cutting they'd feel it for years. Instead, I took a breath. I typed back. "I'll think about it," I wrote. I responded carefully. And I did think about it. For days, I wasn't stupid. I knew the invitation wasn't about love or regret. It was about appearances. They needed me back to fill the empty seat, to make the family photo look normal, to patch the cracks they didn't want anyone else to see. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I decided to go. But not for them. For me. To prove to myself that I could walk into that house, into that room, and not crumble. Thanksgiving Day was cold and gray. I parked down the street and sat in my car for a full 10 minutes, just breathing, steadying myself. Finally, I got out and walked toward the house. The porch looked more worn down than I remembered. The wreath was still there, but the ribbon was faded, almost colorless. I knocked. Ryan opened the door, his expression guarded. "Hey," he said stiffly. He greeted awkwardly. "Hey," I replied evenly. I replied calmly. Inside, the house felt smaller somehow, dimmer. I hung up my jacket and made my way to the dining room. The table was set, the turkey was there, the same mismatched chairs pulled from every room in the house. Mom hovered by the stove, fussing over a casserole. Melissa stood near the fireplace, a glass of wine in her hand. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Mom smiled tightly. "We're glad you came," she said. She said, forcing the words. "Yeah," Ryan echoed. "Good to see you, man." He said, not meeting my eyes. Melissa just lifted her glass in a lazy toast. "To family," she said, her voice dripping with forced cheer. She said with a fake smile. I took a seat without responding. Dinner was a minefield of awkward conversation and strained laughter. They asked shallow questions about my work, my life, but none of it felt real. No one mentioned last year. No one apologized. It was like they had decided if they just ignored it, it never happened. I let them pretend. I answered their questions politely. I passed dishes. I smiled when appropriate. But I didn't offer up anything real. I wasn't there for them. As dessert was served, Melissa stood up again, tapping her glass. I stiffened instinctively. "Before we dig into the pies," she said, glancing around, "I just want to say, I know things got a little messy last year." She said vaguely, avoiding responsibility. "A little messy," I repeated under my breath. I muttered, not hiding my disdain. Melissa ignored me. "But we're family," she continued, smiling brightly. "And family forgives each other." She said grandly. Mom nodded along. Ryan kept his eyes on his plate. I sat back, feeling a strange detachment wash over me. A year ago, I would have clung to those words. I would have wanted to believe them. Now? Now they sounded hollow. Melissa lifted her glass again. "To moving forward," she said. She proposed with finality. I looked around the table at these people who had once meant everything to me, and I realized I didn't need this. Not anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the floor. "Thank you for the invitation," I said quietly. I said, my voice steady. Everyone looked up, startled. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I continued. "It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened." I added firmly. Mom's smile faltered. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Melissa narrowed her eyes slightly. "And it definitely doesn't mean going back to the way things were," I said. I stated calmly. There was a long silence. I picked up my jacket. "I wish you all the best. I said simply. I said, meaning it. Then I turned and walked out the door without looking back. Outside, the air was sharp and fresh. The sky was wide and open above me. I felt lighter than I had in years. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from my friend. "Hope you're still coming over later," he wrote. "We saved you a plate," he added warmly. I smiled. A real smile. Not the brittle, forced one I had worn inside that house. "I'm on my way," I texted back. I responded with a light heart. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without a second glance. They had made their choice a long time ago. Now finally I had made mine. The drive to my friend's house was peaceful. No tightness in my chest. No anger clawing at the back of my throat. Just a strange, quiet sense of relief. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, and laughter spilled out through the windows. It was warm and inviting in a way my childhood home hadn't felt in years. I knocked once before stepping inside. "There he is," my friend called out, waving me in. He exclaimed warmly. "You made it," another friend added, handing me a plate piled high with food. He said, smiling. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, grinning. I answered sincerely. The living room was full. Friends, their partners, a few of their kids chasing each other in circles. No staged photos, no whispered judgments, just chaos and comfort. I sank into the couch, balancing my plate on my knees, and let the noise wash over me. At some point, someone handed me a drink. Someone else shoved a slice of pie into my free hand. The conversation flowed around me like a river, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing on the outside looking in. Later, sitting around the fire pit in the backyard, we traded stories. The good, the bad, the funny disasters that somehow became fond memories. "Families are weird," one of the guys said, shaking his head. He said, laughing. "You don't get to pick them," another added with a shrug. He commented casually. I took a sip of my drink, feeling the heat of the fire on my face. "Sometimes you do," I said thoughtfully. I said, smiling at them. They all looked at me, surprised for a second, then nodded. "You're right," my friend said, clinking his bottle against mine. "Family's what you make it," he said firmly. "Cheers to that," someone else added. He agreed, lifting his glass. We sat there long after the fire died down, bundled in blankets, talking about everything and nothing. No one expected anything from me. No one demanded explanations or apologies. I was enough, just as I was. In the days that followed, life settled into a rhythm that felt right. Work was good. The side business I'd started grew faster than I'd expected. I was busy, but in a way that felt energizing, not draining. I spent weekends hiking, exploring new parts of the city, trying new hobbies I'd always told myself I didn't have time for. I started volunteering at a local shelter, something I'd thought about for years, but never acted on. And through it all, my new family, the one I had chosen, was there. Inviting me to barbecues, dragging me to terrible concerts, showing up with ice cream when the days felt heavy. One night, sitting on my balcony and looking out over the city lights, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Hope you're doing well. We miss you," she wrote. She texted simply. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond. Not out of anger. Not out of bitterness. But because I realized I didn't need anything from them anymore. No apology could change the past. No invitation could erase the hurt. And I was finally okay with that. Instead, I put my phone down and turned my attention back to the night sky. Somewhere out there, people were gathering around tables, laughing, fighting, living their messy lives. Somewhere, people were making mistakes, saying the wrong things, trying and failing, and trying again. And somewhere, there were others, like me, who had learned that sometimes letting go was the greatest act of love you could give yourself. The next weekend, I hosted my own Thanksgiving. It wasn't fancy, just a bunch of folding chairs, mismatched plates, and way too much food. Friends trickled in, bearing pies and salads and bottles of wine. Someone brought their dog, who promptly knocked over the cranberry sauce. Nobody cared. We laughed until our sides hurt. We stayed up way too late, telling stories by candlelight, the kind of night that stitches itself into your memory without even trying. Toward the end of the night, one of my friends raised his glass. "To family," he said, smiling around at all of us. He toasted warmly. "To family," we all echoed, clinking glasses, plastic and glass and paper cups alike, and for the first time in my life, I understood exactly what that word meant. Thanks for watching.